Allison McFarland, my wife, the coolest person I know. Someone commented to me recently, they're like, your wife is really cool. I don't know what story she's going to share about what God has done in her life, but I know it's going to be cool. She's seen so many things. I love her, and I'm glad that you're going to share with us.
So good evening. I think I know most of you out here this evening here with us, but my name is Allison McFarland, and my goal of the testimony I'm going to share with you guys is just to share a little bit of background about how I came to know Christ and follow him. And then I have two specific stories I want to share about just, I guess, like stories in my life where the common theme in them is that life didn't go as I planned, but that I was able and fortunate enough to see that God was leading me through those experiences and ultimately using them for his glory. So if you didn't know, I grew up in Port Lavaca, the same place as Daniel. I've been here at this church at First Baptist in Yoakum for 4 years now. And as Daniel mentioned, Pastor Daniel is my husband. We have 3 kiddos. They're John, Ella, and Zeta. And areas I like to serve in this church are playing drums and with the worship team, and I like helping out in the nursery. Growing up, I grew up in the Presbyterian church. That was the church my family attended every Sunday. It was a smaller church, a bit smaller than this one. We had, on average, maybe 40 people on a Sunday. And so a lot of times, my family was the only kids in church. Not all the time. There were other kids in church, but oftentimes for Sunday school, I would say, in my memory, just maybe roughly half of the Sunday schools I attended were just my siblings and I. And our mom was often our Sunday school teacher. So I think that was a huge blessing, just being able to be ministered to by my family and be encouraged in faith in that way. So at that church, around my middle school years or so, we did a process called confirmation. And at that church, it was where you meet with the pastor a couple weeks in a row. I don't remember exactly how many. But it was an opportunity for you as a believer to ask questions about your faith, ask questions about what the church believed. And then at the end of that period of study and questions and learning, you had the opportunity to affirm your faith, or basically say, this is what I want to stand up and say I believe. And I decided I was ready to do that at the end of that process. And so I still remember that Sunday specifically, and I even remember down to like the outfit, the dress I wore. But I do remember feeling both proud and also really grateful for what Christ had done, and just being able to profess my faith in Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And then just a little bit about my life, kind of skipping fast forward. My faith was continued to grow by getting involved with actually the First Baptist Church. They had a much bigger church member-wise and just a really bigger and active youth group. So some of my friends in middle school started inviting me to their youth group activities, and I just found it really energizing and encouraging to be around other believers that were my age. And I really feel like that church did a good job of developing what it meant to have a personal devotional life with Christ, reading my Bible on my own, starting to develop that habit, and starting to develop a prayer life, and just digging deeper with God and getting to know him more. Fast forward to like college years, I was able to continue in my walk with Christ, and some of the things that encouraged and grew me more were being involved in a group called Campus Crusade for Christ, and it was a group of believers, Christian believers, that were just really trying to encourage each other through discipleship and Bible study, and also really focus on missions and evangelism, sharing your faith with others. One specific thing that I really liked that they taught us at that time was a way of reading the Bible that's called REAP. So it was like an acronym. It stood for read, examine, apply, and pray. And it kind of gave me a framework for my Bible study times. And I have journals where I would go through and read the Bible and then study it deeper and apply it and pray about it. And I still use that some when I'm studying the Bible. Okay, now to the fun stories. So I have 2 times that I wanted to share with you guys. The first one being, I guess it would be going into my junior year of college. I applied to nursing school, and I got declined. I got put on a wait list, and that was a big, disappointment for me. I had, was ready to do that. I wanted to, and I wasn't told no, but I was told wait. And so I had basically a semester. They basically said, we won't accept you for next semester, but we'll accept you for the following. So I had a whole semester where I really didn't need to take any classes and kind of was unsure of what to do next. So I decided not to waste money by taking classes I didn't need to take, and I moved back home and tried to look for a job. I have some funny stories of different random jobs I applied to. I applied to be a cake decorator and got declined because I had no cake repertoire of pictures of cakes I'd done, but I just thought it sounded fun. So I ended up being a waitress, and I definitely learned a lot through that job because it was stressful and hard at times, but also fun. But what that semester allowed me to do was I got in connection with a friend who had a friend who'd done this charity bike ride called Texas 4000. And what it was is they rode bicycles from Austin to Alaska, raising money for cancer research. And the very first time I heard about it, I just thought, well, that's crazy. Only a crazy person would do that. And then I met someone who did it, and I was like, well, she wasn't crazy. Maybe I could do that. And that semester, while I was living at home, I took the time to apply for the program and actually got accepted into doing that ride. And so I just was able to see, in hindsight, it took me a little while to realize that had I been accepted into the nursing program, it's very demanding as far as your studies and your time. I don't think I would have had the time or the energy or the focus to apply for this other thing that required outside time and commitments and fundraising. So God took a turn that, I was disappointed in, and, I had to humble myself and say, well, I wasn't the best in my class, and I didn't get into nursing school right away. But he used that to allow me to do something that ride, it challenged me for sure. If you asked my family before that, I was probably the first person to complain if something was uncomfortable or not fun in life. But that ride really taught me what suffering could be. It was hard, and I learned a lot from it and grew a lot from it. And I definitely was, changed by it. I think it made me I endured things better, and I built really strong bonds with the people that were on that ride with me, and, was really moved by hearing whenever we would meet people along the ride, we'd tell them what we were doing, and we would share with them that we were raising money for cancer research, and so many people, almost everyone you would meet, had a story of someone they knew who'd battled with cancer, and they wanted to share that story with you, and every day when you met someone like that, you had a new person to ride for, a new person to continue striving for. So it's just a really amazing time that God used to encourage and change me. Okay, ready to fast forward to story 2. We were, I guess at this point, where to begin the story, I was working on grad school, working on doing a specialty in nursing, nurse anesthesia. And when I applied, Daniel was my husband at the time, when I applied to the program at TCU in Fort Worth, you had to pick where your clinical site, where you wanted it to be. And that was the first year that they had added Anchorage, Alaska as a primary clinical site. And that was where we rode to in the Texas 4000 ride. So when I saw that, I thought, shining light, I could live up there for a while. That would be really fun. But when Daniel and I talked about it, he thought, I think it'll be better if you put Fort Worth as your primary clinical site, because once we move up there, he's very practical. He thought, I'm going to find a job, and I would like to just continue in that job rather than have to move back and forth. And so I, acquiesced and said, okay, that's fine. I don't even know if I'll get it. You just put a preference down and they kind of place you. So turned out they did place me in Fort Worth. It's okay. I'm here. So we got assigned Fort Worth. So we're like, okay, we're going to be in Fort Worth for 2.5 years. And Then what was interesting about that year, you spend 1 year living in Fort Worth. Well, if you had a clinical site somewhere else. I mean, surprise, surprise, I did end up getting assigned Alaska, spoiler alert, but it wasn't right away. It came up during during the classroom time that a spot opened up, basically. There were 3 people that were going to Alaska, and 1 person fell off. They decided to leave the program. So they announced, okay, if anybody else wants to fill that spot, if you want to change your clinical site, let us know. So I went home and told Daniel, hey, a spot became available. Is this something we want to consider, pray about, think about? And at the time, he was doing interim children's ministry at the church we were at in Fort Worth, and it was going well, and he was serving the Lord, and we were building relationships in that church. So we decided, probably the timing's not right. Let's just stay where we are. And then a second time, a few months later, the spot opened up again. I forget exactly why, but someone, again, couldn't fill that spot. And so I approached him again. I was like, hey, it's open again. What about now? What do we think now? And we thought about it. And at that time, we were both kind of leaning towards, maybe, he didn't really want to be a children's director forever. And so he said, maybe we could go. And then, but before we were able to say yes, someone else fulfilled the spot. So we're like, okay, I guess it wasn't meant to be. And then a third time, this is now summer before clinicals start, and it was only a month before time to move up there, a spot opened up. And we had already kind of jokingly said, if for some reason a spot opens up again, we'll just take it, because we've already talked about it and we wanted to do it, and we won't wait for it. And so they announced that in the summer, thinking, and they said, well, we don't know if anyone's going to take it, because it would be really hard to get your nursing license up there on this amount of time frame, and we know it's short notice. And I walked straight up to them and told them, I'm going, pick me. And they said, okay. So what was crazy about that is, we only had a month to move up there. We basically sold all of our belongings, moved up there with our 2 cars. I felt like a turtle. We just owned what was in, our cars on our backs, and we had a small storage shed for a few keepsakes we kept down here. And we just moved up to Alaska and had walkie-talkies for the drive up there. It was kind of crazy. But this is the God part. Once we got up there, the church that we were at in Fort Worth was called South Hills Baptist Church, and the pastor who was interiming there, they actually had an interim pastor and then hired on a new one while we were there, said, well, I know only one person, because Daniel was asking about connections up there. Do you know anybody up there in Alaska? He said, I know one person. He's at a church in Anchorage. He's at this church called Rabbit Creek up there, and I don't think they're looking for anybody, but, you can meet with him and see who he knows in the area. So our first Sunday there in Alaska, we went to that church, and Daniel walks up to the pastor after service and said, hey, I'm Daniel McFarland. I'm an ordained Baptist minister, and I'm going to be looking for work in the area. So I'd love to meet with you and just talk to you about, what anyone you know in the area who might be looking for help. And lo and behold, that week, the associate pastor who's at the church had just announced to the pastor, I'm ready to retire, but I'll stay until you find a replacement. And then that Sunday, Daniel came and said, I'm looking for work. So that felt very much like a God-led thing, and I was able to see very quickly through that had we maybe been assigned to Alaska before that, Daniel is such a planner that we would have been looking for churches way ahead of time. He may have found a spot that wasn't that church, because the timing just worked out so well that God was leading us to that church. And I just found that really inspiring and encouraging, and like God was definitely using our plan, his plans in my life. Those were definitely not my plans. I mean, I had desires in it for sure, but it didn't go exactly as I had planned. But yet God used that to place us right where he wanted us. So I think the theme in both of those 2 stories I shared with you, with God moving, shows that how a lot of times God is working in our lives. He's orchestrating our lives to bring us maybe into a new place or a new job or a service opportunity for him. And I think, I was fortunate those 2 times to see in hindsight how God was moving through those, but I think there are many, many more times that we don't get to see all the ways that our lives are either leading someone to Christ or encouraging others in the faith. And so I guess just my testimony is trying to remember that when God takes you through something that's not your plan, trying to trust God that he has a plan for it and that his plans work for his glory and for his good. And I guess that's about all I have to say. So I'll just pray for our time and pray for for our time here together and for y'all to feel encouraged in your walk with Christ even when it's tough. Let's pray. Father God, I'm so thankful for your work in my life